Hey, buddy. I need to move that up a little bit. No. They're monkeys. Just move that camera up a little bit. Oh, hi there, guys. So if you can let me know if you can hear me and see me okay. Hopefully you can. So yeah, if you just pop some comments in to say that you can hear me all right, and then we can get cracking. So no doubt I'm going to be interrupted by a couple of these. Hey, Bliss. Hello, cheeky. What you got? Yeah. I didn't see you take that, did I? I think we'll move. Bliss is nicking the wind muffler. So, cheeky girl. Didn't see you get that. Oh. So anyway, I hope everyone's okay. I say if you can just pop me a comment in to just say that you can hear me fine and that everything is working as it should do, that would be great. I don't want to do what I did the other day where I carried on probably talking to myself for a bit. So yeah, so it all looks okay. So hopefully we are good to go. So just let me know who's on, let me know who's listening, you know, send some likes or some hearts so I know that you're on. Having a coffee. So, and again, I will just say this, if apologies, I'm suffering a little bit with hay fever at the moment. So if I suddenly sort of start sneezing or anything, just bear with me, because it's the start of the season always seems to get me. I tend to be better later on, but it's that first, I think it's like the grass pollen and the tree pollen tends to be worse, so it gives me a bit of a sore throat and things. So hopefully we are good to go. Make sure I haven't turned my comments off to make sure that I can see. Okay. Hi, Christine. Yeah, I could totally understand that. I was on a Zoom call with family and friends last night, and they, like, I think I've told you this before, they're over in Canada, so it's my turn to organise the quiz this week. So yeah, got to try and come up with something that works sort of for everybody. Hi, Katie. Hope you're well and staying safe. So good. Right, well, let's get sort of cracking into this. So I had a few posts, a few comments added on. Oh, and if you can hear a couple of dogs, I have a key worker's dog just with me today, and yeah, they are happily chewing on each other. So if you hear that, that's what's going off in the background. So yeah, so I've got a few questions come through on there. So I thought it would be an optimal time to come on and do a live. And if anyone's got any other questions, they can just pop them in there. So just bear with me. I do find hay fever annoying sometimes, particularly with my nose ring. So if I go through the questions that we've got, because there's probably quite a bit there to sort of talk about, but I say if anything crops up and you want to know anything specific, just pop it in the comments and we'll pick it up from there. So one of the comments that came through was about dogs that lunge and bark at cars, particularly. So, I mean, this premise can be useful for whether they lunge and bark at anything, but cars predominantly, because I suppose we are talking about a safety issue. You know, if the dog suddenly pulls into the road and there's a car travelling at speed or pulls you into the road, pulls you over, you know, there are serious sort of risk issues there. So I think the first thing that I want to sort of cover off there is that it is very, very hard to train in the situation. So what I mean by that is if you live, I mean, I'm lucky here, I kind of live on a dead end sort of side street, so you can't get through anywhere, so it's very limited in terms of what traffic is on. So if you live on a main road and and you can't sort of get out of the way, then it becomes quite difficult, because the minute you set foot outside, your dog is practicing something that you don't necessarily want them to practice. So what do I kind of advise clients to do and practice in a way? So sometimes the answer to this is we can't really do much while we're there, because every time you open the door, they're going to practice. So if you can you get them in the car and then drive them somewhere? Now, if they then react in the car, then obviously that's a different training session, and we can talk about sort of car familiarization and desensitization in the car, and then take them to a place so you can enjoy the walk without having to brave walking past 5 main roads. So that would be termed a more management approach, okay? But that doesn't necessarily solve the issue. But the problem with the standard method would be something that we always term as desensitization and counter conditioning. And what that basically means is we would go outside and we would have the dog with us, and we would have, you know, our treats, which I've got some in here, and the cars would be whizzing past, and we would be constantly sort of feeding and sort of getting the dog paid for being calm. And sometimes we might even hold that treat for the dog as the car approaches, and we only release the treat when the car comes past. Now, hi Dawn. One of the problems is with counter conditioning and desensitization, it's really hard, it's really long, and it's hard to be consistent. So there'll be times when you get it right, and there'll be times when your dog lunges, because depending on what's happened in the previous few days, when you get to the road, your dog could be in a very, very calm place, and in which case you think, yes, we've cracked this, and the dog was letting cars go past. And then you could go a couple of days later and the dog's suddenly pulling and barking and lunging at everything. And the reason for that is because of what happened a couple of days before. So for example, you might have been on a park and your dog was playing happily with its ball, or it was playing happily chasing some dogs, or a dog got grumpy with your dog, or it got scared by something. All those things feed into what we term as like their arousal bucket, and how full that bucket is will determine how well they cope with any given stimuli. So if they're really calm, the bucket's nearly empty, they'll cope with it much better. So that's what we have in terms of an issue with counter conditioning and desensitization, is that it's long and hard, and also it can be very testing for dogs. If you imagine holding that treat in front of your dog, and then the car's coming towards them, and they're looking at the car, they're looking at the treat, it actually can be termed as a little bit aversive, because there's something that they really want, but also that car's still coming towards them, they're still feeling that desire of want to go and chase the car, and they only get the treat when the car goes past. So it actually does nothing to work on the car approaching. Now, if I was going to train somebody on how to do counter conditioning and desensitization in that scenario, and I will come back, and as I said, it's not my preferred option, I work on that last, I would be saying to them, as soon as the dog sees the car, whether that's from 400 yards away, 500 yards away, I would start feeding one treat. And then as the car gets to 400 feet, 2 treats, 300 feet, 3 treats. When it's within 200 feet and so on. And as the car's getting closer, I'm feeding more and more and more and more and more. So the idea is that as the car gets closer, the dog gets paid more. If you can hear that, that's Bliss chewing on a bone. I pay them more the closer the car gets. And then once the car's gone, then I pay them almost like a bit of a party. So it increases in value as the car gets closer, not one treat to get the car coming all the way through. Now, the one thing that counter conditioning and desensitization does not take into account is this word saliency. And if you were on the last live, I probably spoke about this a little bit there. Now, saliency is the value that is placed on the item by the dog. And apologies if I'm reusing an analogy, but I use this a lot, which is I tell people I love chocolate brownies. As you can see by my slender figure, I like chocolate brownies, but I also like lemon slices. But the most salient for me is a chocolate brownie. I love a chocolate brownie, and if I was ever going to go into a coffee shop and have a latte, Hi Jodie, hi Jane, hope you're all safe and well. Would be to have a coffee and a chocolate brownie. But I do like lemon slices. But if someone was to offer me 5 lemon slices versus 1 chocolate brownie, I'm still going to choose the chocolate brownie. And even if they said, oh, you can have the 5 lemon slices for the same price. Hello, Gil. For the same price as the 1 chocolate brownie, I would still take the chocolate brownie. Because the chocolate brownie has saliency to me, it has a value, it has importance. And until they got to where it was really difficult to sort of sit down, so if they said, oh, you can have 100 lemon slices for the same price as the chocolate brownie, I might be tempted. Okay, so you can see you have to build that value in. Hi there, Lola. Okay, off they go again. So you can see that the point is that the chasing of the cars for some particular dogs, and obviously we see this quite a lot in collies and herding breeds, is that they have a value to it. They see it as something they need to do, and they often you may find that the anticipation of the car coming they look forward to and they get amped up for it. For some dogs it could be because they're scared of the car. For some dogs it could just because they want to naturally herd. So there's all kinds of dynamics as to the why. So just because you've given them a treat for ignoring it once doesn't take away the saliency and their determination to want to do it again, because they love doing it, so they will do it again if they enjoy it. Okay, anything that gets rewarded will continue. And if you think about it, with a car coming towards them, if it's out of fear and the dog barks at the car telling it to go away, what does the car happily do? It drives past and goes away. So for the dog, they go, yep, told that car to go away, and it sodded off. Okay, so the next one comes and then it repeats and repeats and repeats. So now the dog has been rewarded for the very behavior. So I always sort of look at this, so we have to prepare the dogs for that situation, because trying to train next to a road is really difficult. So look at it as, when you've got the specific problem, almost come away from the specific problem to almost over to this side where you're just dealing with things that are similar. So I might start my training with a dog that pulls and yanks and barks and lunges at cars, to going into my back garden and fastening their favourite toy to a piece of rope or like a washing line, hook it through a hook on the fence, me sat the other side and the dog sat with me, and then start pulling the toy so it moves and might move past the dog. And I would then reward my dogs for not moving after it or chasing after it. Might look a little bit silly, but what I'm teaching them there is that as things move past them, they make a decision to stay still. So I start with something like that. Then I might even do that with a bowl of food being pulled, or I might have, a friend have when we can actually socialize again, is have them pull a bowl or something past the dog. And again, just start teaching the dog that what I want from the dog is for them to just stay still. Then I might get one of my grandchild's toys, so like a big dumper truck, and tie rope to that, and again pull that. So we're now getting more into, we're moving towards more of the specific problem by using something that is similar to a car. So then once I've done that and I'm starting to get some traction on my dog absolutely just ignoring everything, now for me, I can go out onto my street, because I've got a very, as I said, it's a dead end street. We don't get that much fast moving traffic. So I can sit on my step and I can watch slow moving cars go past. If you were struggling, what you could do would be, sorry, just bear with me, I've just lost my comments. Just make sure. You could drive your dog to or go to a small car park, and just because obviously around the car park, the cars will be traveling at a slower speed. So again, you can start rewarding your dog for these cars moving at a slower speed, and again you just build it up, and then you can go from there to a side road to the main road at a quieter time, and then you work through that. So that whole process, counter condition and desensitization, you could be there for 6 months, a year, while training sort of for the situation and preparing your dog in terms of teaching that you just want them, when something moves, you want them to stay still. What you're doing with that is you're creating a saliency on the staying still. You see what I mean? That if you go to where the car is coming fast, the dog's saliency is for the car moving fast, and you've got nothing to battle against it. Okay, hopefully that makes a bit of sense, because what we're doing by starting the back garden on something low level is we are building a saliency. So what we're doing is we're basically taking that lemon slice and going, you know, this lemon slice is better than that chocolate brownie. But ultimately, if your dog values chasing cars that much, you are always going to struggle to find something to beat it. So if that is its highest value, I'll be honest with you, you know, you do find it tough. It's not impossible, but it's much harder. So then you have to create the saliency. You could, if your dog likes toys, use a toy. But there is a problem with using a toy, because a toy would generally create arousal up. Arousal up is really probably not something you want to be creating when you're at the side of a road, because the minute they let go of the toy and they're amped up and the next car comes, guarantee you they're going to pull for that even harder, because you've pushed them up to, you know, that bucket being really, really full. So it is about, okay, I'll come to that in a minute, Emily. So, so then you've got to look at taking it step by step and then building it up in small stages. So Emily's just asked a really good question, which is, what if there is no treat your dog will take when fixed on the car? Okay, so the reality is the only thing you can do at that moment is get her out of there. It's one of those things that there is, once they will not take food, okay, there are two systems at play in a dog. So you've got the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. What's in play when your dog is fixated on the car and watching it come is the sympathetic nervous system, which you could actually get a plate of a cooked Sunday dinner and hold that in front of the dog and they will not touch it, because the car is at that moment in time the thing. So that's why you have to spend time creating the value. So in that scenario, Emily, you're in a very, very difficult position. There is no magic wand. There is no magic answer that will cure that. Okay, you know, you might find some people go, oh, give it a good yank on the lead, but then what you're going to do is you're going to create an aversive event that will be linked to the car, which would potentially make the pull to the car even worse, because now you've created a bit of a fear event to go alongside that. So once we've done that, how do you build value in something? So you can actually create value in something. So I recently worked with dogs that love to take a tea towel off the side. So what we did, we got an old tea towel and we played with the tea towel for a bit, and then we started having a tea towel with a new toy, and we played with them both. And very soon the dog was mixing up and sometimes getting the tea towel and sometimes getting the toy. And over time we started to trim the tea towel down so that they were only grabbing the toy. And then very quickly the dog preferred the toy to the towel, because we'd created that situation. So in terms of food, what I would look at is go, well, okay, Emily, is there a food that your dog really does like? Okay. Or can you get your dog's focus on, do they like a toy? But as I said, the problem with toy and roadside, it's not my preferred option. My preferred option would be to try and build a value into something and then use something that the dog does have saliency to in that situation. So I would be out in my back garden, I'd be out on the front, I'd be out on some walks with no stimulus, and I'd be really paying value into a high value treat when things move. So if my dog really likes, I don't know, dare I say it, you know, smoked sausage, I'm going to save that smoked sausage and only use smoked sausage at times when things are moving. So if that's a jogger running past or a bike going past or something flying around somewhere, I'm going to use that, and then I'm gradually going to start introducing it at the road. But here's the key with the road. You need to go and not be right by the roadside. So you would have to start, you know, find a spot. If you're on a busy road, find a side road that comes off it and start some way down that side road. and start feeding the high value food, and then make sure that the dog knows that they get that high value food when a car whizzes past, but you've got to do it from a distance. So the key thing when working on something like car is you cannot work at the point where the car is going to come past within 4 feet of you. Your dog's never going to get it. It's almost like trying to take a 6-year-old child and say, right, go and do your degree. You know, it's that tough. It's not going to happen unless you find that magic bullet that is that food that is the highest value that switches your dog on. But I would argue if your dog is not switching off for any food when there's a car, the car is providing the most salient outcome. So you have to work on distance. The other option will be then to think about, well, is there an environmental reward that your dog's like? Does your dog like doing an action? Does your dog like doing a trick? So you could move away from food and start going, well, okay, what about if I put my dog into middle? Will my dog do middle? Because if they've learnt middle, and middle means come to middle and stay and don't move until I release you, can they do middle while a car? But again, you would have to start that away from the car. You couldn't do it 4 feet at the roadside. You'd have to start it and then get closer. So that would be then using an environmental reward of the enjoyment of playing a game. That could be a hand touch, or ultimately, you know, a favourite trick. So almost like, what do we do with? I'm trying to think. I can't. Emily, did you say Aussie? I can't remember whether it was a collie or an Aussie. But what with a collie, we had a collie that was chasing cars, and we just basically taught it sit pretty. So it was like, sit pretty. So as we were walking down the road and a car was coming, we would just go sit pretty and just get the dog into a sit pretty, because then what that did was it got the dog focused on the trick. Now you can imagine trying to walk down a busy road doing sit pretty. You'd be there forever on a busy road. But what it enabled us to do was every so often we were able then to throw in a car coming, but we didn't do sit pretty, and the dog didn't chase. Okay, and then the next car we did sit pretty, and then another 2 cars went past, and you can see we then moved it onto variable reward ratio. Okay, so that would be passing cars. But if your dog has such a saliency, the only option to start with is really to avoid those situations and apply management to start with, and then gradually work on, hello big boy, I know, is then gradually work on getting closer and closer. Sometimes you're in a tough spot because you're on a house, on a street, and it's a busy street, and you've got to get round that. That's really difficult. So it's about trying to find a way that you can mitigate. Are you trying to find my treats, buddy? Go on then. Yeah, sit. Good boy. Go on then. So does that make sense, Emily, a little bit, as I've been joined by? So let me know if that makes a little bit of sense, Emily. But I'd say it would be trying to build that value. For anyone who's having a new dog, obviously, if you look at what I did with Bliss in terms of how to raise the perfect puppy, what we did there was we created saliency straight away in toys, food, tricks, games. Oh, do you just want to watch these two? I always find it quite entertaining. So I built value into that very early. So from 8 weeks of age, Bliss was being played with toys. We were doing mini little tricks. We were creating proximity. We were creating value. And we were creating focus onto food. So that's just something if you're having a new dog. But if you end up with a dog that is a little bit fixated, yes, Rebel. I know someone's passing by. You tell them. Okay, yeah. So yeah, it's a tough one, Emily. You know, it's that first 4 months of life is such an important phase, and we say that if whatever they can almost experience within that first 4 months, you know, pretty much will make them rock solid against many outcomes. So that one exposure to a car could potentially see them okay with cars, but it is but those are the things to go through. So it's trying to create the saliency into something, but you have to do that away from the road, because if you're trying to battle it, you know, it's almost like, you know, if you've trying to think of a silly analogy, but if you've got a child that really loved Grand Theft Auto as a computer game and you really didn't like it, and you then tried while they're playing the game to try and get them to focus on FIFA, well, it's never going to happen because they've got such a saliency onto Grand Theft Auto. But if all of a sudden, for some reason, you know, the game broke and then you gave them another game and they were able to work on that without any competition, they find value in that game, and then they might get a little bit, dare I say it, hooked on that game, and then, you know, you almost get extinction into the Grand Theft Auto game. It's a pretty stupid analogy, but hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. Oh, hi Sharon. Oh, hope things are okay in France, and hope Kaylee's okay. So just bear with me. I'm gonna. Oh, hay fever. Stupid. Hopefully I didn't do that down the microphone. Apologies. So does that make a little bit of sense for car work? So I say start away from the road, try and create some value and saliency into certain foods, or a trick, or you know, a hand touch would be a good one as well, getting the dog to come and touch your hand, but what we call a sustained hand touch. So as you're walking down the road, you notice a car coming, you hold your hand out, the dog comes and puts its nose on your hand. Excuse me again. And holds their nose there so the car can go past, and then you can reward them. Okay, because now you're not, the treat isn't competing with the car coming past, but the fun of the game of the nose touch. So that's just another option. But what I would be doing is practicing with things that aren't cars that move past the dog. So I'd be enlisting what I could, whether that's children in the house, husband, wife, partner, whatever, just to stop yanking things past the dog and the dog not reacting and the dog getting paid for not reacting. And then I would move it closer to the road in stages. Okay, but to try and do it at the roadside when the dog already has a saliency to it, I'll be honest, success rate on something like that, obviously it's dependent on the dog in front of you, but if they have really got a saliency to it, you'd be there forever. You know, I'm never going to stop my love of chocolate brownies, so, you know, so I hope that makes sense. But if you have got any more questions about the car one, just go in from there. And the other thing to do as well is actually when you walk past parked cars, just reward your dog. So actually every time they walk towards the car, give them a treat. So the car may not be moving, but every time they see a car, you know, reward them or pay them. And so you start pairing this association of car means food, car means food, car means food, and that will then start to create a saliency. And almost you could be walking past a car and the dog will naturally look up to you and expect a reward, and then you're going to move that onto variable reward ratio, so they don't get the reward every time, they just get it sometimes. Okay, so excuse me again, apologies for, it always embarrasses me when I have hay fever and I'm going to start drooling down it. So, but I say any questions, pop them in and I'll come back to that. So the next question that I got was digging at the carpet or sofa. Okay, so what to do in these situations? So again, you can try and rack your brains as to why is the dog doing it. So is it doing it out of frustration? Is it doing it out of boredom? Is it doing it out of enjoyment? Or is it doing out as an anxiety behaviour, i.e. for something that's either scared the dog or so it's doing it to be a coping mechanism? So what do we do in those scenarios? So for me, again, don't tell the dog off, okay? And I would have been working on away from that an attention noise. So an attention noise for me, I have two for my dog. So I have one which is the word thank you, or the words thank you. Excuse me. and I have one that is and it's said like that. And that tone never changes. So if my dogs are about to do something, so let's say, for example, there's a toy on the side and I can see them going over and maybe edging up onto the table to get it, I might just go, thank you, and that will see them on cue. Well done. We'll see the dog sort of come to you and look for that treat. Okay, so that word thank you is just an interruption cue. So it's to get them off from what they're doing. They may not switch off on that because if they're so fixated into it, it's going to be hard. But that's why you start by training this attention noise with just having the dog in front of you, and you would just be going, thank you, treat, thank you, treat, thank you, treat. Or I'm doing that because I'm clicker training. So it would be like click, treat, click, treat, click, treat. But I'd be using my voice. I'd be going, thank you, treat, thank you, treat. I know, Bliss. So what they know is that every time I say the word thank you, they get a treat. So it interrupts the behaviour. Now, I would be doing that for probably 10 to 20 repetitions in the morning, 10 to 20 repetitions at night, just with that ordinary ordinary daily food allowance. And if they're on raw, I'd just be using a spoon and doing it. If they were on dry, obviously kibble, I'd just be using that as I am here. And again, or if I needed to put gloves on. So I'd just be mixing it up whichever way I needed it to be. There we go. And I would do that for a week, and then I'd start testing it. So the dog might be 6 feet away from me and not looking at me, and I will just go, thank you. And if they then engage with me and I can give them a treat, I know the word's starting to have meaning, and I just keep practicing. And then you can almost use it a bit like a recall cue. So the dogs will be out doing something, you'll say the attention word, and boom, they come to you. The other thing to do is to have things like blocker boards, so you can actually just wedge something down between. So it just, again, interrupts the behaviour. You don't scare the dog, so it's a very slow sort of bring in. And then move them onto something more appropriate. So that could be, not that, have this, okay? So if the dog is a digger because it likes digging, then I would look to, if you can, create a digging area in your back garden. So just get some planks of wood, fasten it together, put some sand in it, and then maybe bury some bones. So they can go out and they can get that digging enjoyment fulfilled by doing it in an appropriate manner. So again, if they started digging at the sofa or the carpet, then I'd be like, okay, I'm going to interrupt that, and then I'm going to take them outside to the box, and I'd probably put something underneath it and let them dig. And while they're digging, I would then reward them. So again, they know that, okay, we interrupt that, but we take them straight out to where we want them to dig. So that's kind of what I would do in that scenario. But the other thing would be to block and interrupt, and then move them on to something more appropriate. So again, it's not that, this. And then the key thing for me is almost watch your dog and look for the subtle signals and try where possible to go, what happens in the minute or so before they start digging? Okay, so what you're trying to build there is almost your smoke alarm. So what do they do just before they start digging? Do they walk around the perimeter of your kitchen? Do they start sniffing the ground? Do they start twirling? Do they start barking? Do they start doing zoomies around the back garden, then come in and dig? Okay, so I'd be trying to build that picture of what do they do, so that as soon as they start doing that, I can be ready to not even let them start digging. Okay, and if I've done the digging platform sort of outside, I can move them into that. So they just start to learn that after they've done that, then they can go and do it in there rather than digging at the sofa or the carpet. But again, it's just a case of just interrupting and moving them onto something else. But again, if you're going to use something like an interruption noise or even the hand cue, so, you know, the hand touch, you've got to build the value into that away from the digging, because while they're digging, oops, just bear with me while I turn that phone off. I thought I turned it down. Oops. Oh, to voicemail soon enough. You've got to build value into it and make sure that they touch everything, okay? And just go from there, okay? Do it away, practice it in lots of different locations, get them coming over, and then as they start coming towards that sofa, it can be touch. Oh, the monkey. Someone wants to play. So does that make a little bit of sense in terms of digging? So if it is an enjoyment thing, then create the enjoyment for them, give them a digging pit, you know, because we may not want them to dig, but actually it's a normal natural behaviour that dogs do. You know, obviously when they're in warm areas, they will dig down in soil to go to cooler areas, and in cooler places, then they will dig down to get to warmer soil. So, and then they sometimes just get enjoyment from it. You know, they enjoy sort of sniffing down, finding stuff that's buried. I mean, Bliss will probably find a stone, so she'll dig that out. So it is a sort of normal behaviour. So we just have to make sure that we give them an outlet. So, you know, they're not doing anything wrong in the context of a dog. It's only wrong in the context that we don't want them digging at our sofa. So, but the important thing for me is spotting what happens immediately before, okay? And then as soon as you start seeing it, you know you've got to be ready. And you can actually start stepping in really, really quickly and going, right, okay, you found all the pre-cues of digging and you've spotted what is the first one. So you can actually not let them go through the second, the third or the fourth. You just go straight into, right, I'm going to give you a frozen Kong. I'm going to give you a snuffle mat. I'm going to take you to your digging pot outside way before they even go to digging at that area, because you're now giving them something different to do. Okay? Does that make a little bit of sense? So hopefully if that does, just let me know. And then we can come back to that as well. So not sure if we've got the person on that asked me about digging, but and that can be used for lots of other different behaviours as well. You know, it's just about moving them on to something more appropriate. Okay, so let's cover off crate training. So people have lots of views on crates. I mean, I love crate training, not just because, you know, I mean, Rebel, he lives on the sofa here. Bliss tends to live on here, but Bliss does still have her crate. And I'll be honest with you, when she's tired, she'll take herself off in that crate. Rebel, he's a weirdo, because I have obviously larger crates, but he will take himself into the smallest crate possible. So he'll go into the very tiny crate and curl up into the smallest ball. I'm like, and he enjoys it in there. But what I've done with my crates is always make sure that they're not forced into them, but when they do go in, they get paid. And Bliss, when she was a pup, I was actually in the big puppy pen, and when she was in the crate, we were playing a little game of tug, little game of food finder, going in and out. So for her, the crate is a wonderful place to be, and that's the key, is you make the crate the absolute best place to be. So the minute they set foot in it, if they sniff it, throw a treat. And even the treat doesn't have to go in the crate. You know, if they go and sniff the crate, you can throw the treat towards the crate. If they go in the crate, well, I'd put a lot of their dinner in there. So with Bliss as a puppy, most of her feed through the day was just paid into her going into her crate, and then we played with toys, we played with food, and she just starts gravitating in there. And then once they're happily going in, I'm looking for her to start almost deciding to lie down in there. And then when she starts to lie down, I start paying her for lying down. And then I start closing the door, and I might close the door from being fully open to half closed. And then I might go to just closing it another quarter, and then closing it sort of to halfway, and then closing it so there's the quarter open, and then fully closing it but immediately opening it. Close it, open it, close it, open it. And all the time I'm just using my dog's daily food allowance to just feed the dog. And then I might close it, wait a few seconds, open it, reward. Close it, wait a few seconds, open it, reward. And we go through that, and then we build up But the key with anything that I do when working on that is don't just always increase. Sometimes, you know, you go, I'm going to close the door for 10 seconds. Sometimes I'm going to close the door for 1 second. Sometimes for 15 seconds. Sometimes for 3 seconds. Sometimes for 2 seconds. And it's just going to be all over the place. So they never know that they've got to go for longer. Sometimes it's going to open quick. Sometimes it's going to open short. And it just builds their confidence that, yeah, okay, this just happens. It's just a normal part of their daily routine. Okay. But the key element is, you know, put some nice bed in there. And if it's a young dog, then, you know, put a t-shirt in that smells of you. Let them sort of feel that safety. If you have a new puppy and you're thinking, well, you know, they may howl, you know, in the night, you know, well, what you can do is, I mean, puppies should be sleeping probably for anything up to, you know, 18, 20 hours a day. So all we do is when they're sleeping, you know, go off and do something. And then just get them used to, if they do wake up sort of on their own, it's not a surprise, but then you can come in and you can start building that confidence. You can, if you want to, have the crate upstairs with you and have it in the bedroom and then gradually move the dog away from you. I think I like my preferences. I just go, well, where do I want the dog to be eventually? And I'll try and start there. But as with anything, it's about training the dog in front of you. I've been lucky with both mine that, you know, from day one, we made that their place to be, and that's where they got fed. So both Bliss and Rebel, when they were pups, got fed in their crates and their pens. So it was never a place that even they didn't feel comfortable with. So when it was bedtime, you know, they just used to settle in there. And if you've done a bit of the enrichment stuff, you know, puppies will sleep. And one of the mistakes we probably do make with puppies is that because they're so cute and small and tiny, we do spend a lot of time having them in our arms and holding them and interacting with them. And we create dependency on us. Whereas for me, coupled with crate training, is making sure that they can have time away from you, even as a young pup. And yes, I spend a lot of time and investment on proximity to me and orientation to me, but I also spend an equal amount of time on independence, being away from me, to make sure that they are happy away from me as well as being with me. And they know that when it's the right time. So, but sometimes with puppies, we skew it because we just want to spend so much time with them. And, you know, obviously this boy is a Rottie Cross. You can imagine when he was a cute little pup, you know, that probably weighed, you know, a couple of kilograms, you know, it's like, yeah, everything's fine. But then when he grows into this, you know, 35 kilogram beast, you know, a lot of those behaviors that they've learned we don't want, and it's much harder to put in. So I just kind of look at it from a point of view as, if I try and sort of work on what I want now, it's much easier. Obviously, you know, things do change, but that's kind of what I look at. So the crate training is just make that crate a wonderful place to be. So if you're doing it with a puppy and you've got a puppy pen and a crate, just wait for them to step into the crate. Just wait for them to show any interaction. Hello, madam. You do tolerate it, don't you, buddy? But just make it fun. Put, you know, play toys in there. But again, don't just put, you know, I would always leave them sort of one toy in there for them to entertain themselves with, and probably one enrichment toy. So I like to have sort of one toy for them, and particularly like for puppies, something for them. Well, okay, something for them to chew on and just so that they can have that experience of chewing on something appropriate, which will actually prevent some of the chewing on other items because you're already starting them to have something to chew on. So proper sort of, I mean, some of these puppy sort of Nyla bones, I mean, Bliss has had this since a pup, and you can still see that it's looking a bit worse for wear now, but it is something that, you know, you go, right, chew on that, and she's never ever chewed on anything else. So she can have something like that. Then you might have one plush toy, or you might have a puppy Kong with some food in there just to keep them sort of entertained while they're in. And then other toys I will take in with me, so I will go and set foot inside the pen and then play games inside the pen with them. So it just becomes the perfect place to be. Okay. So again, does that make sense? If it doesn't, just pop me a question in there, and hopefully. Okay, so Angela, what if they only dig the carpet when you're not in the room? Well, the reality is there's nothing you can do, is there? Because you're not there. But you've got to look at it in terms of, so for that, you would have to apply management. Okay, so you have to then try and train them not to do it when you're there, but apply management when you're not there. Okay, because if you leave them free, so that could be, well, okay, they've got free access to the room and they have got pleasure from digging at the carpet, they're not going to stop doing it because they've got enjoyment from it. But if it's because if it's happening when you're not there, then it could well be linked to a bit of anxiety because you're not there. Because is it near a doorway? So is it near where you may have left the room by? So they could be digging to try and get to you. Okay, so it could be because there's a little bit of anxiety there. So yeah, it's like with anything. If a dog's doing something when you're not there, there is nothing you can do about it because you're not there to intervene. You're not there to give an attention noise. You're not there to interrupt. But you can also prepare them and teach them that it's not what you want them to do. But if they don't do it when you're there, you can't do that because they're never digging when you're there. So does that make a bit of sense, Angela, that, you know, obviously if you can only train them not to dig if they dig in your presence, because you can move them on to something else. But if they do it when you're not there, then it's self-fulfilling and it's self-rewarding. And the enjoyment that they get for digging, and I say enjoyment because the enjoyment could be they're feeling stressed because you have left them and the digging satisfies that need, or it is just a process of them trying to dig to get back to where you are. And that in itself becomes sort of self-fulfilling, and they will just keep going on that cycle. So yeah, that one is a really tough one, but the only thing you can do is go to management, which would either be, if it is a specific place, is cordon that place off and see if it moves further back, because it doesn't always. But again, if it's from anxiety, we've got to be careful because not having an outlet for that anxiety could move on to something else, and that's what you've got to look at. So it's in terms of sort of saying, yeah, so seems to be anxiety to get out of their room and into the front room, normally when we've gone to bed. Okay, so yeah, so I'd say because they spend a lot of time, if they spend a lot of time in the front room and they want to be in there, then they'll dig to try and get in there. So I think there's a couple of things you could do slightly differently. I mean, I say I'm always very careful if you're talking about anxiety, because I could say, well, cordon that area off, but actually that could bring in even more anxiety because they haven't got an outlet to release the cortisol that's in the body. And then they could move on to something more inappropriate. So they could, if they're in the kitchen and they dig at the kitchen floor to get out, and then you cordon off that kitchen floor where they dig, well, they could move on to chewing your kitchen cupboards because they have to have an outlet for something. And then people say, well, can I crate train? Well, if you do the crate training right and they enjoy the crate, then that would be fine. But if you just then shove them in a crate, they'll probably fret and do all kinds of things. And if you've seen some of the videos of dogs trying to get out of crate, so if it's anxiety based, it's a more complex issue. And I would definitely say in that scenario, obviously the case needs looking at more specifically, and then help from a professional. Oh, well done. Okay, and then help from a professional to really sort of narrow it down, and really take advice on that, on the specific case, because it's not something that has a straightforward ABC answer, because we don't want to introduce any more stress to the dog. But one of the things you could do is invest in a motion sensitive camera that allows you to speak through it. So for me down here, I have sort of three cameras. I have one that is one of those, it's what they call a pan and tilt camera, so it's auto tracking, so as the dogs move around, the camera follows them, and it only ever records to the card when it's triggered for movement. But what it allows me to do is to pan the room and see what they're doing. So I remember I had one dog staying with me during the hotel, and I sort of just gone out around the shop, and the dog had jumped up onto the windowsill and was behind the curtains. And with the camera, I was able to say the dog's name and bring them back down. And I think actually it was a dog that should have been in the dining room, and he jumped over the gate there and then come to the window. But I was able to use the microphone to speak through it and go, come here. Now there are ones that they're very inexpensive. I mean, mine is I'm trying to think what mine is, Samsung pan and tilt, but it can sound a siren, it can sound dogs barking, because obviously it's not designed for dogs, so it can make a sound of a dog barking, but you can also speak to the dogs. There are ones that deliver treats. I think is it called a Furbo? I think it's a Furbo. It's like a little white thing that stands up and it has a camera on it. Don't think the camera tracks the dog, so it's just a static one. But again, you could train the dog with that. I mean, I've got a treat and train machine, which again, you could use something like that in conjunction. But again, it's about understanding the problem. So the Furbo one, you'd be watching the camera, your dog will be coming to the door. You could say a command that you've trained, because the key thing, again, if you use something like that, would be to go say a word and then press the button so the treat flies out from the camera. So I'll say from the camera because it's just a little camera in the housing. So you would say, oh, good boy, press the button, treat flies out. Good boy, press the button, treat flies out. So then when they start the digging, you'd be able to say, oh, good boy, and it would deliver a treat. Now, the question that you get asked there is, aren't you rewarding the dog for digging? Well, obviously I'm using good boy as an example, but you could use your interruption word. So you could use your or your thank you, or what are you up to? And then wait for them to disengage from digging at the floor. And then when you deliver the treat, you're rewarding them for not digging. Okay, you're not pressing the button to give them a treat the minute they're digging. So, think about the dynamics of when the treat is delivered. The treat is delivered for stopping digging, not for while they're digging. Okay, so that's the clear difference. But all of those things can work for when you're not there. So treat and train machine can work slightly differently, which is a great one, skipping on to sort of separation anxiety again a little bit. But what you can do with the treat and train machine is you can fill it with, say, your dog's daily food allowance or some favourite treats, and it has a lid that comes down, and you can almost set it, and there's different size discs that go in it, so you can put some larger pieces or some smaller pieces, and you can set it to deliver a number of treats or just one, and it can actually have a timer, and it has a bleep on it that just makes a bleep noise, and the dog knows the treat's coming. And what you can do is you can set it going to deliver a treat every minute or every 30 seconds until it runs out. And so what happens there is that the dog will be going to the door, the treat's being fired, and so all of a sudden it keeps them occupied from needing to go and dig. So that's kind of where I would be at with it in terms of training. It would have to be, I'd be looking at management to prevent them from doing it, but I would be certainly trying to make sure that it's not anxiety driven, because that would require a different sort of prognosis. But if it's just because the dog enjoys it, then management can be used, because you're not creating stress, but you do also have to be mindful that it can redirect onto something else, because if they need an outlet for something, they're going to find an outlet for something. So it's always about trying to give them something appropriate. So it could be that, and in your particular case, Angela, if it happens within, I don't know, let's say if it's in the first 10 minutes of you leaving them, then maybe look at some things like long stay bones, that you can give them, so that they're occupied for that 10 minutes to get them past that hurdle of that 10-minute time frame. So then when they've finished gnawing on a bone, they're done, and they won't go to digging at the door because they're now occupied by something else. But also the key for that as well is to not just give them the bone when you're going upstairs or leaving them in that room. I would be giving them the bones at different times, so it becomes not a predictor of what's going to happen, but they always get it when they're in that room, so they don't chew or don't dig at the floor, but they get it at different times as well. Otherwise it will become a predictor. So would tiling the floor cause them to redirect? Again, of course it's possible, okay? Because what you got to remember with a dog is that if they have desire on something, and depending where it's coming from in terms of a place, then the brain for the dog will go, okay, I normally do something to cope with this. So the brain still wants to do something to remove that, what if it's tension, stress, or whether if it's just learned behavior. But you might find that they just, scratch the floor for a bit and then it doesn't get anything, so it goes into extinction. So it really depends on the type of dog. I mean, if you have, say, like a confident dog that isn't really showing any signs of anxiety, they'll probably work through it very differently to an anxious dog. I mean, what have I done in the past before? So I've taken like a thin metal sheet of steel, and we've just taped it over the carpeted area. And what happened for the first couple of times is the dog started to scratch in the same place, but all that happened because they can't dig through steel, and it doesn't do them any harm because there's nothing sharp on it, so it's not. And they tried it for a bit, and then after, I think it was about 3 days, they stopped digging, and they didn't redirect onto anything else. So, can it work? Would tiling work? Well, yeah, it could. Excuse me again. But also be mindful that they could move on to something else. So that's really what I'm trying to say to you, is don't just think that because we go to management it takes the problem away. Be ready to spot in case it is, because it will be much easier to try and deal with it as a redirection than as a learned behavior of something they always do. So if you can step in, but that's where you have to be ready to act. So things like cameras and being ready to move rather than just let them see whether they're doing it, because we don't want them to learn something else to replace it. But again, if you're going to reward them, you reward them for when they've stopped. So if they are digging while you're there, use your attention noise, wait for them to stop, and then reward. So it's always the action of stopping. In the scenario, I mean, this is, in a way, Angela, I suppose, when we talk about separation being very tough to work on, it's because obviously we're not there when dogs have separation anxiety. So in the same scenario, if they're digging when you're not present, it's the same problem, that because what we're trying to do with the dog is to mark and reward a behavior that we like, to say that's what we like. Well, if you're not there, you can't mark and reward anything. So there's no learning opportunity for the dog, and it's almost a self-learning. So, it's like anything, isn't it? If something works for the dog, so if digging placates a need and they enjoy it, it will always continue. Whether we like it or not, it will continue, and they will have their own fun. So, Angela, I hope that's helpful. Just trying to rack my brain to make sure that I've kind of covered everything in there. Okay. But again, if it is frustration to get out of their room, one of the other things that you could do is pop them in the room, make out that you're sort of going up to bed, come back down and come in the room, walk out, come back in, walk out, come back in, and then go up to bed. So really just look at it from a routine point of view. So think, is my normal routine very predictable? Okay. So when we're getting ready, so I take it is this, yeah, so normally when you've gone to bed. Okay. So if you think about it, do you normally pop them in the room, go straight upstairs and go to bed? And that could be at a certain time. So that could be, let's say you're going to bed at 10 o'clock. And again, the last program you watch is the news. So the news jingle comes on, you stand up, the dogs get taken to an area, the door gets closed, you go upstairs. So that is your predictable routine for the dog. So the dog now goes, the news jingle music, you stand up, we move into the kitchen, you close the kitchen door, you stand upstairs, I dig. Okay, so that's the cycle. So if you can interrupt your routine by doing things very differently, so maybe if you, so I'm not saying that you do watch the news at 10 o'clock, but just bear with me. So you just go, right, we normally watch the news and stand up. So what we're going to do this time is we're going to watch the news. We're going to stand up, but instead of taking the dogs to the kitchen, we're going to go outside. Then we're going to come in. Then we're going to sit down. Then we're going to go into the kitchen and mess about. Then we're going to come back into the living room. Then we're going to put the dogs in the room. Then we're going to come into the living room. Then we're going to come back out. We're going to bring the dogs out of the kitchen, put them back in the living room, sit down. Then we're going to pop them in the kitchen. Then we're going to go upstairs to bed. Okay. So you're breaking up that cycle of events that is a predictor, so that when they go into that digging mode, and then go from there. But if you, instead of thinking about, maybe if you've got an option to maybe put something where the carpet is and put that down, and just see. So rather than going to the expense of, because I have known dogs rip up tiled flooring, even that's been glued down. I've seen houses with it all put up. The dogs can do amazing things if they put their mind to it. So maybe just popping something down and just see if that prevents it. You know, pop a chair. I mean, I know if they're doing it by the door, obviously you can't necessarily do it that well, but again, just interrupt that. Okay, so is that all right? Okay. And so then the sort of final one that I had sent through to me was barking at the mailman, paper boy, passers by at the window. And again, I think I might have covered this a little bit on the last live that we did. So again, the key thing is about trying to teach. Oh, it looks so nice now that we have some settled pooches. It's about teaching them what you want them to do. Okay, so the normal thing for a dog would be somebody walks past the window, they see it as either something to be worried about, something to be excited about, trying to tell them that they're here. Okay, because barking is this raw form of communication that says, I'm here, who are you, what are we doing, I'm lonely, whatever that is, and that's that conversation at the window. So, but again, when I'm there, this is when I've got to train it. So what do I want to train when I'm at the window? So if I show you my window now, you probably see there's a few nose marks sort of along the window, because I do let Bliss go up there and she will sit on the back of the sofa and she will watch the world go by. And when someone walks past, she gets fed if she does nothing. Okay, so as you saw with Rebel, when he saw another dog just walking past, he was like, and you just get that little bit, and I can then interrupt that and then move him away. But what I would be doing is, if I had a barking frenzy as something came in, then I would close the curtains. Okay, so they almost lose sight of the outside world. And then once they've stopped barking, curtains open. And then I go through that process of opening, close, opening and close, opening and close. And if it's really bad, I might start with the curtains actually just open a tiny, tiny bit. So the window that they can see through is very narrow. So if they do see a person approach and they haven't seen the person approaching from 400 yards away at the very top of the street, and then see them 400 yards that way, it's a very narrow view. So they only see them for a very, almost a 40-yard block. So they don't have time to build up that frustration, excitement, fear, whatever it is that we're dealing with. And it means that they'll be at a lower level. Their bucket will be sort of a lower level. Okay. So the way that kind of works, it is a form of what we almost would term negative punishment. So it's the removal of something from the dog. Okay, so they lose the sight of being able to see what's out there. They want to watch the world go by, but if they're going to bark, it loses. Okay, and then we bring them away. You could leave the curtains open and move them away, but I tend, again, depending on the type of dog. So if it's a confident dog, yeah, I could bring them away, wait for them to be calm and then take them back. But if it's an anxious, fearful dog, pulling them away carefully, and this isn't yanking them and it's not pulling them forcefully, it's almost taking up the slack of the lead and bringing them away, could also be aversive for them. And it's it's about learning to deal with the sort of stress of the world, but losing that would be termed negative punishment, because what we're trying to do is trying to say, right, you are going to lose, we are going to take away the view, which is the negative aspects, because negative in behavioural terms means take away or a minus sign, and positive means add. It doesn't mean good or bad. It's often a misconception that people think that positive or plus R, positive reward training, is good training. Positive R or plus R just means add and reinforce. Okay, and reinforcement is defined by behaviour increasing after the event, and punishment is defined by behaviour decreasing. So in this context of the window, closing the curtains is taking away the view, so therefore it's negative. If the behaviour of barking reduces, because what we're doing is we're only opening the window when they're not barking, so opening the curtains to view when they're quiet is adding something to the situation of quiet. So we're taking something away when they're barking, but we're adding something when they're quiet. So the way that would work is that the take away the view, if they bark less, that means the behaviour is decreasing, so therefore it is termed as punishment. So negative punishment would be closing the curtains, losing the view, dog's barking diminishes, that's negative punishment. So the flip side of that would be they're now quiet, curtains open, the dog gets to see outside. So they now start to be quiet more, so it would be positive reinforcement for the quiet and negative punishment for the barking. So I hope that makes sense. I don't want to get too sort of geeky and sort of behavioural science on you, but that's basically what it means. If you could also add in there that we're actually using sort of negative reinforcement, i.e. that the sight is coming, we're taking away the view, and then it's coming back, but only when they've stopped. So it's a very flowing subject in sort of how it looks at, but there are so many trainers that will try and talk to you about positive reinforcement that think that it means good, but it doesn't. It's how we define whether we add something, whether it increases a behaviour. And I think I gave this analogy last week where I said that if I was to have a dog jump up and bite me on the arm and I punched it on the nose, which I wouldn't do, but if I punched it on the nose, but the dog started biting me more, by definition, that would be positive reinforcement, because I've added the punch on the nose and the behaviour is increased. So as I said, once something is increased in what happens, then it's deemed reinforcement. I've added the punch, it's positive reinforcement. But had the biting got less, then it would be deemed positive punishment because the behaviour decreases. So it's one of those areas that I don't want to sort of get into, but just understand there is a difference of what it means from a behavioural science point of view. So the flip side then is, I might practice with people in my own house. So I might pop the dog in the window and get the kids and everybody to just walk up and down in front of the window. And as the dog is quiet and calm, feed and reward. Feed and reward, feed and reward, feed and reward. And then I might get them to put a red coat on so they look more like a postman, and carry a bag and carry a satchel. And just do all the things up and down and get the dog sort of used to it. And then I would do it with a postman. Okay? So you just build them up. And that's what we call training for the situation rather than in it. And it all stems back to training, like we said, for the lunging at the car. We don't want to be training in the situation. We want to try and prepare the dog for it. So does that make sense? So just losing sight and then opening. And it's what I would do with the car. So if a dog barked at passers-by in the car, I'd try and pop up some temporary curtains and go, right, you bark, you lose sight. Now, I get it if you're driving, you can't do this, but if you've got someone in the car with you, then you can close it and then you can open it a little bit. Close it, open it, close it, open it. And all the time the dog can learn that, oh, if I'm quiet, I get to see the world. And that might be what they want. I mean, there are some things being done at the moment where they're sort of trying to figure out what dogs actually, what happens to a dog's vision through car windows. Because we do know that it is a distorted view. Even with our eyes, when we look through a car window, the view distorts. And I've seen it with a couple of dogs that I've got. We pop them into the back of the car, we close the boot lid, and all of a sudden the dog starts barking. Lift the boot lid, people are walking past the car, the dog's not barking. It is only when the boot's shut. Now, is it because the boot's shut and they feel trapped? Or is it because their vision is distorted, so they don't know what they're sort of seeing, they can't link it? So, there's still some work to go on finding out that. So those are the things I had. I just want to check that I've covered everything off. So does that make sense? Has that sort of explained it, hopefully? So let me know if you understood my waffle and intermittent sneezing and dribbling of nose. So apologies for anything that came down the microphone a little bit too loud. So sincere apologies. Oh, so let's just have a look. Linda. Hi, Linda. Yeah, you okay? So what word do you use for recall? Because mine don't recall for a whistle. I've realised doing this course, I don't have a single word, and I think I'm confusing them by calling their name or using here, come, etc. Okay, so what do I have for my dogs? They do recall to their name, but I would say that my recall for Rebel is middle. So I use the middle command. So I trained middle and I will call middle. But I will be honest that I've done so much work on proximity and orientation that it's very rare for them to go too far away. So they go out and they come back and they check in really regularly with me. So it's a weird one to answer, but so when I was on a walk at the weekend, so I'm walking along and Bliss was happily running out, but she will go out, and if she goes too far, then I will use the whistle, just because that travels better than your voice, and she will come back to that. So for Bliss, the whistle does work. For Rebel, I will call middle because he loves that position. And the reason why I like middle as a command for recall is because middle means one thing. It means come between my legs and, well, if you want a stand or a sit or whatever, but it basically means come back here and be between my legs. Okay. And it's unambiguous, isn't it? Because it's like it really only has that one meaning. So it's very clear. There's no confusion. That's what the dog has to do. And then when they come to that position, they get rewarded. So yeah, so you have to pay into that by training middle first and foremost. They will come back to their names to a degree, but so I suppose in answer to that question, Rebels is middle and Bliss would be the whistle. But if you can pay into proximity and having them sort of always checking in with you, it almost negates that need for a recall because they just gravitate back towards you. And then the other key thing to think about is if you've got here, come, do this, try and pick one and really focus on that one word. So and always wait. So now, Linda, what I'd do is I would be going, right, okay, I'm going to really work on this. I'm going to really try hard to pick one word, and that might be come here, okay? And every time I see them coming towards me, even if it's just naturally, I'm going to, as they get close, I'm going to start saying that word and then deliver some food or fuss or toy play or whatever I'm going to use. But I'm going to pair that word with them actually on the way back to me. So I'm pretty much going to make, and I might start when they're only sort of 3 paces away from me, but I know they're coming back to me, and then go from there so that I can actually use that word pretty well. Okay. But yeah, if you can work on middle's a great one, and then, but you have to build that. I mean, for Rebel, that probably took a few months, to get it as strong as it is outside, because remember I said at the very start when we're talking about sort of dogs pulling and saliency. So if Rebel wanted to go off and find a pile of horse manure, me shouting middle is probably not going to have that much impact, because his saliency for the horse manure, hey boy, used to be really high, and he would have been in the horse manure and not come back to middle. So I had to build that value as we went, and now he'll come back to middle. Well, to be honest, 99.9% of the time. Brill. Okay, so hopefully that answers that question. But I say, if you can, if you want, almost sort of pick one word, and have it as a stupid word if you want. Pick banana, pick refrigerator, pick a word just that's random, that can only ever have that one meaning, and then go from there. So that's my mum and dad ringing back. So you still use middle, thanks, as we practice that every day. Okay, brilliant. So yeah, middle is well worth it. Middle is I don't know what it is. I just such a, in a way, kind of a simple thing, but it's so useful in so many aspects of life. So for me, if I was to say to anybody, what's the one command that I want to train, it'd be middle, because it's useful for recall. It's useful for if you have a reactive dog and you can have your dog come into your leg position. It's useful at the side of a road if you've got a dog that lunges towards cars, because they're doing something and having to learn to stay in position. If you're in a crowded area, being in middle means they're protected by you. So there are just so many uses for it. So I say middle is an absolute sort of cracking game, trick, command that I think everybody should work on. It's just got so much flexibility as a protocol to work on in so many scenarios, that can give you an outlet to fix a problem without trying to face down the problem, if that makes a bit of sense. So it just goes, okay, whenever a motorbike comes whizzing past, my dog's coming to middle. When we walk down the canal path and there's cyclists coming down, as you've probably heard, there's millions of cyclists on the canal path now, so I've avoided it. But middle would be, as soon as they see a cyclist, we're in middle, cyclist middle, and then we go from there. Cool. So I think, yeah, oh gosh, listen to me prattle on. So hopefully that was useful. If you've got any more questions, I'll just hang on a couple of minutes, and if anyone's got anything else they want to ask, we'll upload this so you can have a look. I'll pop it up onto the YouTube channel as well, and then we can go from there. But if hopefully everyone is clear on what we've done, and I'll probably post another one again with some try and get some questions in for next week as well. So I hope you find these little lives useful. I mean, I'll look at it and I go, I'd do it outside, but I'd probably be, my nose would be running so bad. I'm trying to keep safe, so you don't have to avoid that. So they love the liver and peanut butter treats. Brilliant. So, but I really hope you find these useful, just little bits. I might even sort of see if we can actually set up a training session to sort of show you the barking at the window and what have you. The hard part at the moment is that it'd be nice to have a dog that actually did bark at the window, so I could show you it in action. But I say I'll pop a post up later on in the week, maybe asking for topics for next week's live, and then we can go from there. Okay, right. So Emily, what I will do is I'll pop a link in this comment stream. Just see if I might see if I can try and do it now, because we did a live talk on separation anxiety that I've already sort of recorded and done. So I'm going to try and see if I can find it on here and pop you a link in. So let me just see if I can find it. Apologies, well, I'm a typical bloke, can't do more than too many things at once. Recorded lives, how to mitigate the effects of separation anxiety. Right, so let me just try and copy this this link, and I will try and post this back in. Oops. Cool. Right. So hopefully, Emily, you will. I've just posted that link into the comments. Hopefully that will get you on the right track, so you can go and have a watch of that. Brilliant. So hope you enjoyed it. I will put a post up later on in the week, so you can give me some new topics and we can discuss them. I don't mind discussing similar topics, or even if we have to go back and sort of have another chat about separation anxiety, because it is such a massive topic and there's so many things. But if you do want some, I have an information sheet on separation. So if you want to send me an email at info@canineassist.co.uk, and Canine Assist spelled CANINE ASSIST. So if you send me that to info@canineassist.co.uk, I can send you over that little information pack on separation anxiety and a step-by-step guide and a few things like that might just help out. So if you want to do that, fire that over. So yeah, brilliant. Well, thanks for listening to me waffle on. It's always a bit strange doing these, but you know, I think it's good to get some information out there and give you something to work on and give you a chance to get some help on specific problems. So thank you for attending. Thank you for listening to me. I really do hope you find them useful. Look out for the next post, and I will see you very soon. Take care. You're fast asleep. Oh, come on then, puppies.